The first thing I noticed when I walked into the private dining room was the silence. It was the kind of silence that didn't belong in a birthday party. Conversation stopped. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the waiter pouring wine paused for half a second. 12 people sat around the long table under the golden chandelier of the Crown restaurant. My husband, his relatives, his mother at the head of the table in a glittering red dress, and, sitting directly beside her, in the seat that should have been mine, was Chloe Sullivan, Michael's intern. For a moment, I thought I had walked into the wrong room. But then Sharon Miller, my mother-in-law, smiled. Not warmly, not apologetically. It was the kind of smile people use when they're about to say something cruel and know they'll get away with it. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," she said loudly. Her voice cut across the room like a knife. The relatives around the table chuckled politely. I stood in the doorway, still holding the small mahogany gift box I had brought for her birthday. "Sorry I'm late," I said calmly. "There was an emergency meeting at the firm." "Oh, of course there was," Sharon replied. Her eyes slid over my black suit as if inspecting something unpleasant. "You're always so busy." A cousin at the far end laughed softly. Someone muttered something about career women. I ignored them and walked toward the table. That's when I saw it clearly. Chloe wasn't just sitting in my chair. She was leaning toward Sharon, peeling shrimp from a plate and placing them delicately onto my mother-in-law's dish. Like a devoted daughter. Sharon patted her hand affectionately. "Such a thoughtful girl," she said. Chloe looked up as I approached. Her eyes widened slightly in a performance so perfect it might have deserved an award. "Oh my God," she said softly. "Was this seat yours?" She began to rise from the chair. But Sharon immediately grabbed her wrist. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," she said. "You're our guest." Then she turned to me. "Oh, Evelyn, you can sit over there." She pointed to a small side table in the corner. The children's table. 3 kids under 10 years old sat there playing with chopsticks. For a second, I honestly thought she was joking. Then someone laughed. Not loudly, but loud enough. And the truth settled in the room like fog. They meant it. I slowly turned my head toward my husband. Michael sat beside Chloe, staring down at his plate. He hadn't said a word. He hadn't even looked at me. The man who once told me I was the most important person in his life couldn't even meet my eyes. I waited. 1 second. 2. 5. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Evelyn," he murmured. "Don't make a scene." Something inside my chest went very quiet. Around the table, a few relatives shifted uncomfortably. But Sharon leaned forward, clearly enjoying herself. "You know," she said loudly, lifting her wine glass, "a woman's most important job is taking care of her family." She gestured toward Chloe. "This girl understands that." Chloe blushed modestly. "I just wanted to help," she said softly. Sharon nodded approvingly. "And she only earns $40,000 a year," she continued. "But somehow she still has time to cook, visit, and show respect." Her eyes slid back to me. "Unlike some people who make millions and forget where they came from." A few of the relatives chuckled again. I felt every pair of eyes in the room on me. Waiting. Watching. Judging. But what they didn't know was this. Every luxury in their lives. The apartment my husband bragged about. The car he drove. The medical treatments Sharon loved to boast about to her friends. Had been paid for by me. Every dollar. Every bill. Every comfort. And yet here I was. Standing in the doorway of a room I paid for. Being told to sit with the children. I slowly looked back at Michael. Still no eye contact. Still no defense. Just silence. Then Sharon leaned closer, lowering her voice slightly but not enough. "You see, Evelyn," she said. "A real wife knows her place." She lifted her wine glass again. "And tonight," she added sweetly, "that place isn't at this table." The room erupted into awkward laughter. For a moment, I simply stood there. Then I did something none of them expected. I smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a nervous one. A calm, quiet smile. The kind people give when they finally understand something important. Because in that exact moment, I realized something. They thought I needed them. They thought the life they were living belonged to them. They thought humiliating me would make them feel powerful. They were wrong. I walked slowly toward the table. Sharon's eyes flicked to the small mahogany box in my hands. Greed flashed across her face. "Oh," she said. "My birthday gift." She reached out eagerly. "What did you get me this year?" Inside the box was a vintage Cartier emerald brooch. I had won it at an auction in London the month before. Its estimated value was just over $150,000. I opened the lid briefly so the jewels caught the light. Sharon's eyes widened. Then I closed it again and let the box fall. It dropped straight into the metal trash can beside the table with a sharp, metallic clang. The room went completely silent. Sharon stared at the trash can as if it had just insulted her personally. My hand slipped, I said calmly. Then I looked directly at Michael. For the first time that evening, he finally raised his eyes to meet mine. "You're embarrassing the family," he whispered harshly. I tilted my head slightly. "No," I said quietly. "You're doing that all by yourself." I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, Sharon slammed her glass on the table. "If you leave now," she shouted, "don't bother coming back." I paused at the doorway. Then I turned back just long enough to say one last thing. "I built this family," I said calmly. "And tomorrow," I looked straight at my husband, "you're going to find out how." Then I walked out of the room. Behind me, the silence exploded into shouting. But I didn't look back, because at that moment, Michael Miller still believed tomorrow would be the biggest day of his career. He believed he was about to become the director of Apex Tech. He believed his future was about to begin. What he didn't know was that the company he worked for, the company he had been stealing from, the company whose board meeting he would attend at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, belonged to me, and by the end of that meeting, Michael Miller would discover exactly how expensive humiliation could be. People love to believe betrayal happens suddenly, like a door slamming, like a scream, like a dramatic confession. But betrayal almost never arrives like that. It arrives quietly, in the way someone stops listening when you speak, in the way they stop celebrating your wins, in the way they start acting like your success is an insult. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've already been shrinking yourself for someone who was never going to grow. That's what happened to me. Because if you had met me before Michael, you wouldn't have recognized the woman who stood in that doorway tonight. 2 years ago, I was Evelyn Reed. Not Evelyn Miller. Not someone's wife. Not someone's daughter-in-law. Evelyn Reed, partner at Vanguard Holdings. The youngest partner in the firm's history. The woman people whispered about when I entered a room, not because I was loud, but because I never had to be. My life was built on numbers, contracts, strategy, power, and the truth is, I was good at it. I was the person companies called when billion-dollar deals were bleeding out on the table and someone needed to stop the damage. I was the person who could sit in a room full of men twice my age and make them do exactly what they didn't want to do, without ever raising my voice. My salary was public, $3 million a year, but the real money was private. Trust funds, private investments, equity. I had built an empire so quietly that most people assumed it didn't exist. And for a long time, that was exactly how I wanted it. Because money doesn't protect you from loneliness. In fact, it attracts a special kind of loneliness. The kind where people smile at you while calculating what you can do for them. The kind where compliments are never free. The kind where every romantic interest looks like a negotiation. So when I met Michael Miller, it felt like breathing air that didn't cost anything. I met him at a charity concert. One of those events my firm sponsored because it looked good on press releases. I went alone. No entourage. No assistant. Just me. A quiet night. Michael was there with his department Apex Tech's procurement team because their company had contributed to the charity. He wasn't impressive in the way my world defined impressive. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He didn't try to dominate a room. He just watched. He listened. And when we started talking, he didn't ask what I did with that eager greed people usually hide behind politeness. He asked what I liked, what books I read, what music calmed me down when I couldn't sleep. No one had asked me questions like that in years. He made me laugh in a way that wasn't strategic. He said he admired how focused I was. He said I seemed like a woman who knew what she wanted. And when he kissed me for the first time, it didn't feel like possession. It felt like safety. That's what I told myself anyway. We dated quietly. I never brought him to corporate galas. I never invited him into my world of private dining rooms and board meetings. Not because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want to crush him. Michael made $80,000 a year. I made that in a week. And I saw it in his eyes the first time he came to my apartment and looked at the view. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was something softer. Something more dangerous. The feeling of being small. And I made a decision that night. A decision I thought was love. I would make myself smaller, so he could feel bigger. So I stopped talking about my work. If I landed a massive deal, I would tell him I had a good day. If I worked late, I would say a client needed something. When he asked how much my bonus was, I would laugh and change the subject. When I bought him something expensive, I would downplay it. And I told myself I was protecting him. Protecting us. But what I was really doing was training him to believe my success was optional. Something he could tolerate, not respect. Then we got married. And that's when Sharon arrived. Not at the wedding. She arrived into my life. Like a storm that expected the world to rearrange itself around her. Sharon Miller was the kind of woman who measured love by control. She didn't hug you. She evaluated you. She didn't ask how you were doing. She asked what you were doing wrong. The first time she met me properly, she looked me up and down and said, "So, you're the one who thinks she can handle my son." That was Sharon's favorite word. Handle. As if Michael was a prize stallion she was leasing out. At first, I tried to be patient. I told myself she was protective, that she loved him, that she needed time. But Sharon wasn't protective. She was territorial. And I should have understood right away that a woman like Sharon could never accept a daughter-in-law who didn't need her. Because need is the only leverage she knows how to use. And I didn't need her. So she decided to make sure I would. It began with small comments. Little needles dipped in sugar. "Oh, Evelyn, you work so much. Michael must get lonely. Oh, Evelyn, you dress so professionally. Men like softer women at home. Oh, Evelyn, you're so lucky Michael chose you. He's such a good man." Lucky. That word again? As if marrying him was an achievement. As if he rescued me. And to keep the peace. I smiled. I nodded. I swallowed it. Then Sharon got sick. Not dramatically. Not the kind of sickness that makes people whisper prayers. The kind that costs money. Ongoing treatments. Medication. Specialists. It wasn't life-threatening. But it was expensive. Michael came to me one night, looking uncomfortable. He sat on the edge of my couch like a man preparing to ask for a loan. "Mom's bills are getting high," he said carefully. "I can handle it," I replied immediately. I didn't even think about it. Because that's what you do for family, right? You help. You support. You build. Michael's shoulders loosened in relief. But then his pride flared. "I mean, we can split it," he offered quickly. "No. I've got it." He hesitated. And then he nodded. That was the first time I paid to keep his world stable. And once you start, it's easy to keep going. A few months later, his younger sister needed tuition help. Michael mentioned it casually, like it wasn't his business. But I saw the stress behind his eyes. So I handled it, quietly. No announcement. No drama. Just a transfer. Then the car. Michael's old car broke down, and he started taking the subway to work. He complained about it. Not to me directly. Michael never complained to me directly. He complained to Sharon. And Sharon complained to me. "With all your money," she said one afternoon, sipping tea in my kitchen like she owned it. "You can't even buy my son a decent car? What kind of wife are you?" Michael looked embarrassed. So I bought him a car. A beautiful luxury sedan. I told him it was a good deal. I told him it was practical. The truth was, I bought it because I didn't want to watch him shrink. Again. And the most important one, the house. Michael wanted a home that felt like his. Not a place Evelyn owns. Not a place Evelyn bought. He wanted something he could point to and feel like a man. So I bought the house. And I put it in his name. I told myself it was romantic. I told myself it was trust. I told myself it was love. But it was also dangerous. Because it taught him something. It taught him that my power could be transferred. That my assets could be moved. That my name didn't have to be on what I built. And Sharon watched all of it happen like a hungry woman, learning the location of a pantry. Every time I paid for something, Sharon smiled a little wider. Not with gratitude. With entitlement, she began showing off, telling relatives about the lifestyle, bragging about their house. "Michael takes such good care of his family," she would say loudly at gatherings. "He provides so well." I remember the first time I heard her say it. We were at a family barbecue. Someone complimented the house. Sharon laughed and waved her hand. "My son works hard," she said. "He deserves the best." I stood there holding a plate of food I didn't even taste. Michael didn't correct her. He smiled. He let it happen. I should have confronted it then. I should have said something. But I didn't. because I still believed the lie I had built in my own head. That keeping him comfortable would keep him loyal. That protecting his ego would protect the marriage. That if I didn't challenge him, he wouldn't resent me. But resentment doesn't come from being challenged. Resentment comes from knowing you're standing on something you didn't build, and fearing someone might remind you. As my career continued rising, Michael's energy changed. He stopped asking about my day. When I told him I was promoted, he said, "That's great," and immediately changed the subject. When I came home exhausted, he said, "Must be nice, having a job where people worship you." He laughed like it was a joke, but his eyes didn't joke. And then he began making little rules. Not explicitly. Michael wasn't a man who commanded. He was a man who manipulated gently. "I just don't like when you talk about money around my friends," he'd say. "It makes me uncomfortable." "I just think you should dress more casually around my family," he'd say. "You look intimidating." "I just wish you didn't act like you're the boss everywhere," he'd say. "Sometimes I want to feel like the man." And every time he said it, I adjusted. I softened. I lowered my voice. I stopped wearing my power suits to family events. I let Sharon talk over me. I let Michael explain things to me in front of his relatives as if I didn't run teams of analysts like armies. I turned myself into a version of me that could fit into their small world. And I told myself it was temporary. That once Michael felt secure, he would come back to me. But instead, the more I shrank, the bolder they became. Sharon started calling me our lucky charm, as if my success was spiritual inheritance from her bloodline. "She married into our family and suddenly she's rich," Sharon would say. "It's because God favors the Millers." And the relatives nodded along. Because people love narratives that make them feel like they contributed to someone else's victory. It makes envy feel righteous. It makes entitlement feel deserved. Then, 3 months ago, I came home early. It was a rainy night. I remember that too well, because rain has a way of making betrayal feel sharper. I walked quietly into the hallway. I planned to surprise Michael. I thought maybe we could have dinner alone. Maybe we could talk. Maybe we could find our way back. Instead, I heard Sharon's voice in the kitchen. Sharp, venomous, low enough to feel private, but loud enough to be cruel. "Michael, you need to stop letting that woman walk all over you." My stomach tightened. I stopped moving. Sharon continued. "She makes money, yes. But she's too aggressive. She's crushing your spirit. You don't even seem like a man anymore." My fingers curled into the strap of my bag. I held my breath, waiting for Michael to defend me, to say, "No." Instead, I heard him laugh, a bitter laugh. "Mom," he said, "if I don't rely on her, how do you think we afford anything?" Sharon's tone softened, like she had been waiting for that admission. "Exactly," she said. "She's our family's cash cow." My vision blurred slightly. Not from tears, from shock. Sharon's next words were worse. "I'm not saying divorce her," she said, calm and practical. "That would be stupid. If you divorce her, who pays my bills? Who pays your sister's tuition? But a man needs an outlet. It's natural to have fun on the side." There was a pause. A pause long enough for my heart to start pounding. Michael didn't speak immediately. And for one desperate second, I thought he might say no. Then he exhaled. And I heard him say, casually, like he was talking about weather, "Well, there is that new intern." My throat tightened. My hands went numb. And the strange thing is, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I didn't burst into the room screaming. Because something colder than pain moved through me. Something I recognized. The same thing I felt in conference rooms when someone tried to cheat a contract. When someone tried to manipulate numbers. When someone thought I wouldn't notice. That night, I didn't confront Michael. Not yet. I went to the bedroom quietly. I waited until the voices in the kitchen faded. Then, I walked into the garage, opened his car, and found what betrayal always leaves behind. Not just evidence. Arrogance. A lipstick that wasn't mine. And a receipt for a motel. I stood there under the harsh fluorescent light, holding a piece of paper that smelled like cheap perfume and lies. And I understood something clearly. Michael hadn't been cheating because he was unhappy. He was cheating because he was weak. Because he needed worship. Because he needed someone who could look at him and believe he mattered. And that meant the woman wasn't the real enemy. The enemy was what he had become. That's when I started watching. Not emotionally. Professionally. The way I watched failing companies before I dismantled them. I didn't need a confession. I needed proof. I didn't need closure. I needed control. And that's what I began building. Quietly. While Michael believed he was getting away with it. While Sharon believed she owned me. While Chloe believed she was about to replace me. And the most dangerous part? They didn't even try to hide it. Because when people think you're soft, they become careless. They get bold. They start humiliating you in public. They start moving into your seat. They start telling you to sit with the children. They forget that the person they're mocking built the entire table. And by the time they remember, it's usually too late. That's why when Sharon pointed at the kids' table tonight, something inside me didn't break. It clicked into place. Because now I understood exactly what I was dealing with. Not a family. Not love. Not misunderstanding. A coordinated extraction. A parasite system. And in my world, when the numbers don't add up, you don't negotiate. You audit. You liquidate. You remove the liability. And tomorrow, Michael Miller was walking into the room where I would do exactly that. Most betrayals don't happen in darkness. They happen in ordinary places. Bright kitchens, quiet living rooms, cars parked under streetlights, places where trust once lived. And that night, the truth about my marriage revealed itself under the soft yellow light of our kitchen. I didn't storm into the room. I didn't shout. I didn't demand explanations. Because when you've spent years negotiating billion-dollar deals, you learn something very important. Information is power, and emotion destroys information. So I stayed still, hidden in the hallway. Listening, Sharon's voice came first. Sharp, satisfied. The voice of a woman who believed she was winning. You see, she said. I told you, that woman is too arrogant. She thinks because she earns money she's above everyone. Michael exhaled slowly. A tired sound. But not the kind of tired that comes from guilt. The kind that comes from annoyance. You don't understand, he muttered. She works all the time. She's never home. She talks like she's the boss everywhere. Sharon scoffed. Of course she does. Women like her always forget who they are. Then she lowered her voice slightly. Tell me something honestly, Michael. Are you even happy? There was a long pause. I could hear the faint clink of a glass touching the marble counter. Michael poured himself a drink. Ice cubes rattled. Then he said something that made my fingers tighten around my bag. Happy? He repeated. She makes $3 million a year. I'd be stupid to complain. Sharon laughed. Not kindly. Not softly. It was the laugh of someone who had just confirmed their suspicions. You see? She said. That's exactly what I mean. She's useful. But useful and lovable are not the same thing. Another pause. And then Sharon delivered the sentence that would eventually destroy her entire world. She's our family's cash cow. The words hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, I thought my heart might actually stop. Not because the insult hurt, but because of how casually it was said. Like discussing a grocery bill. Like commenting on the weather. As if my entire life, my work, my effort, my loyalty, could be reduced to a farm animal producing milk. I waited. I waited for Michael to say something. Anything. I waited for him to defend me. But he didn't. Instead, he laughed quietly. You're not wrong, he said. The floor beneath my feet felt strangely unstable. Sharon continued speaking, now completely relaxed. Listen to me carefully, she said. I'm not telling you to divorce her. That would be stupid. If you divorce her, you lose the money. But a man needs balance. You can't live your whole life feeling smaller than your wife. Michael didn't respond immediately. I could hear him walking across the kitchen, opening the refrigerator, closing it again. The sound of his glass touching the counter. Finally, Sharon spoke again. Tell me something. Have you at least found someone who reminds you you're still a man? The silence that followed was different. Heavy. Charged. Then Michael said, well, there is that new intern. Sharon chuckled. Oh? What's her name? Chloe. Pretty? Michael didn't hesitate. Very. Does she admire you? That question made Sharon sound almost excited. Michael laughed. She thinks I'm brilliant. She says the company would fall apart without me. Sharon clapped her hands once, delighted. See? That's what a man needs. A woman who respects him, not one who treats him like an employee. My breathing became shallow. Not from sadness. From clarity. Every word they spoke stripped away another illusion. Every sentence revealed the truth more clearly. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a rough patch. This was a system. A strategy. Michael continued talking. You should see the way she looks at me, he said. Like I'm the most powerful man in the room. Sharon laughed again. Well, of course she does. You probably pay for everything. Michael hesitated. Then he chuckled. Technically, Evelyn does. But Chloe doesn't need to know that. Sharon's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. So what does Chloe think? Michael's answer came instantly. She thinks I'm the one who supports my wife. That sentence landed like a bullet. Sharon burst into laughter. Oh, Michael, she said. You're finally learning. Let Evelyn build the money. You build the life. I felt something inside me freeze. Not break. Freeze. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The car. The hotel receipts. The late nights. The strange perfume that sometimes lingered on Michael's jacket. I had ignored those details because love encourages blindness. But numbers don't lie. And patterns never lie. Michael took another drink. You should see Chloe, he continued. She's ambitious. She wants to move up fast. Sharon hummed approvingly. Well then, take care of her. A man in your position should have someone loyal. And if Evelyn ever complains? Sharon's voice hardened. Remind her she's lucky you married her. My hand tightened around the strap of my bag so hard my knuckles turned white. Lucky. That word again? Lucky that he chose me. Lucky that his family tolerated me. Lucky that my money belonged to them. Then Sharon asked one last question. So tell me something, Michael. Does this Chloe know about Evelyn? Michael laughed. Of course. What does she say about your wife? The answer came without hesitation. Chloe says Evelyn is intimidating, cold, like a machine. Sharon snorted. Well, that sounds accurate. Then Michael said something that permanently ended my marriage. She's basically an ATM with legs. Sharon laughed so hard she nearly choked. And that was the moment everything changed. Because hearing those words didn't make me cry. It didn't make me angry. It made me calm. The kind of calm that arrives when the final piece of a puzzle slides into place. When confusion disappears. When you stop asking why. And start calculating what comes next. I stepped quietly away from the hallway before they could see me. My heels made no sound on the hardwood floor. Years of boardroom training had taught me how to move silently when necessary. I entered the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. For several minutes, I simply stared at the wall. Not thinking, not feeling, just processing. Because the moment you realize someone has been using you, the entire relationship rearranges itself in your mind. Memories change. Words take on new meaning. Even smiles become suspicious. I remembered the car I bought him, the house I put in his name, the bills I quietly paid for Sharon's treatments, the tuition transfers, the vacations, the dinners, the gifts, all of it, financed by the woman they were calling a cow. And the most fascinating part? They genuinely believed they were smarter than me. That belief was the mistake that would eventually destroy them. Because arrogance makes people careless. And careless people leave trails. So, instead of confronting Michael, I did something else. I went to the garage. His car was parked exactly where he always left it. The sleek black sedan I bought for him 2 years ago. The one Sharon loved to brag about to her friends. I opened the driver's door, and the smell hit me immediately. Perfumey. Sweet. Floral. Young. Not mine. I sat in the driver's seat slowly. The leather was warm. The dashboard lights flickered on. And that's when I noticed something interesting. The dashcam. Michael installed it months earlier after a minor accident. He once told me it was for insurance protection. He had no idea it would eventually protect me instead. I removed the memory card, walked back inside, and inserted it into my laptop. The first few videos were normal. Traffic. Conversations about work. Music. Then, I found the one I was looking for. Michael's voice filled the room. Loud. Relaxed. Cocky. Chloe's laughter followed. Light. Flirtatious. The camera angle showed the dashboard and part of the passenger seat. Her legs were visible, crossed elegantly. She leaned toward him. So tell me honestly, she said. What does your wife actually do? Michael shrugged. Finance. Chloe giggled. Sounds boring. She's boring. I felt something in my chest tighten. But I kept watching. Chloe tilted her head. So why stay married? Michael smirked. You ever see a company turn down free capital? Chloe laughed. So she pays for everything? Michael tapped the steering wheel proudly. She thinks she does. What does that mean? It means she works. And I manage the results. Chloe leaned closer. You're smart. Michael grinned. You have no idea. Then she asked the question that sealed everything. So what is she really to you? Michael didn't even hesitate. She's basically an ATM with legs. Chloe burst into laughter and leaned across the seat to kiss him. I paused the video, stared at the frozen image on the screen, and finally allowed myself to breathe. Slowly, deeply, because in that moment, the situation stopped being emotional. It became mathematical. Michael believed he was the smartest person in the room. Sharon believed she had manipulated the perfect system. Chloe believed she was climbing into power. But none of them understood one very simple truth. They were operating inside a structure I built. A structure funded by my money, protected by my legal teams, and connected to companies they had never even heard of. Which meant removing them wouldn't be difficult. All it would require was timing and patience. I closed the laptop, picked up my phone, and dialed one number. Sarah answered on the first ring. "Evening, Evelyn. I need a favor," I said calmly. "What kind?" "Run a quiet audit on Apex Tech." Sarah didn't ask why. She never did. "How deep?" "Everything." "Executives?" "Especially procurement." There was a short pause. Then Sarah asked the only question that mattered. "Do you want this handled quietly or publicly?" I thought about the dinner table, about the children's table, about Sharon's laughter, about Michael's voice calling me an ATM. Then I answered, "Publicly." Sarah chuckled softly. "Understood." "And Evelyn?" "Yes?" "This sounds expensive." I smiled slightly. "Good. Because tomorrow, Michael Miller believed he was attending a meeting about his promotion. What he didn't know was that the company he worked for had just been quietly acquired. And the new majority owner was me. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. And by 2:30, Michael Miller's entire life would collapse in front of him. Not because I hated him, but because bad investments have to be written off. Humiliation rarely begins with a single moment. It builds. Slowly, quietly, like pressure inside a sealed container. And eventually, something cracks. For me, that moment arrived 3 weeks after I discovered Michael's little arrangement with his intern. 3 weeks of watching, 3 weeks of collecting information, 3 weeks of pretending nothing had changed. Michael never noticed. That was the most fascinating part. When people believe they fooled you, they relax. They stop hiding. They become careless. And careless people reveal everything. I watched the hotel charges appear on the shared credit card account. I watched the expensive dinners that weren't with me. I watched the late-night text messages. And I watched Michael transform into a version of himself I barely recognized. More confident, more arrogant. As if cheating had given him permission to become someone else. Someone important. Someone admired. But the real masterpiece of arrogance was Chloe. Because Chloe didn't act like a secret. She acted like a replacement. The first time I saw her in person was at Apex Tech's annual networking event. Michael had invited me. Reluctantly, I could tell from the way he asked. "Just show up for a little while," he said. "People expect to see the executive wives." Executive wives? That phrase almost made me laugh. But I went anyway. Not as a wife. As an observer. The ballroom was crowded. Executives. Investors. Consultants. The kind of room where everyone pretends to be powerful. Michael spotted me near the entrance. For a brief second, surprise flashed across his face. Then he recovered. "Oh," he said. "I didn't think you'd actually come." "I said I would," I replied calmly. He nodded quickly. "Well, good." Then he looked around the room, like someone searching for a witness. "That's great." And that's when Chloe appeared. She walked toward us confidently, wearing a silver dress that was clearly designed to attract attention. Her smile was wide, bright, calculated. "Michael," she said cheerfully. Then she turned to me. "Oh, you must be Evelyn." Her voice carried just enough sweetness to hide the insult underneath. I studied her face. Young, perfect skin, ambitious eyes. She extended her hand. "I've heard so much about you." "I'm sure you have," I replied. She tilted her head slightly, the way predators do when they're curious. "You work in finance, right?" "Yes." "That must be stressful." Her smile widened. "I prefer simpler work." Michael laughed awkwardly. "Chloe keeps the office running," he said. "She's incredibly efficient." The admiration in his voice was unmistakable. Chloe noticed it too. She placed a hand lightly on his arm. "Oh, stop," she said playfully. "You're embarrassing me." Then she turned back to me. "You're lucky," she added softly. Michael is such a talented leader. Lucky. That word again? I smiled politely. I'm aware. Chloe's eyes flickered briefly. Something about my calmness unsettled her. Predators expect fear. They don't know what to do with silence. The conversation ended shortly afterward. Michael rushed away to greet other executives. Chloe lingered a moment longer, and as she walked past me, she said something very quietly. So nice finally meeting you. Then she leaned closer. Close enough that only I could hear. I understand why Michael feels responsible for you. Then she walked away. Responsible. Not married. Not committed. Responsible. That word told me everything I needed to know. Chloe didn't see herself as an affair. She saw herself as the upgrade. But even that wasn't the moment that pushed everything too far. The real breaking point was Sharon's birthday dinner. The same dinner I walked out of earlier tonight. But what you didn't see, what none of them realized, was how carefully that dinner had been planned. Sharon loved celebrations, especially when she could show off. She booked a private dining room at the Crown, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. The invitation list included her closest relatives, 2 family friends, Michael, and of course, me. What she didn't know was that I had already seen the reservation details, including the seating chart, and the name placed beside Michael, Chloe Sullivan. I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. Just long enough for everyone to get comfortable. Just long enough for the humiliation to feel intentional. Because humiliation works best when it has witnesses. When I stepped into that room earlier tonight, everything unfolded exactly the way I expected. Sharon's smile, Chloe in my seat, Michael's silence, the children's table, the laughter. Every piece of the scene fit perfectly into the pattern I had already calculated. But there was one moment that surprised even me. When Sharon said this, a woman's real job is taking care of her family. Then she gestured to Chloe. This girl understands that. The room laughed. Michael looked embarrassed. But he still didn't speak. And that was the moment I understood something important. He wasn't trapped between 2 women. He had chosen. And once a man makes that choice, you stop negotiating. You start closing accounts. So I walked toward the table. Sharon's eyes immediately locked onto the gift box in my hands. She adored expensive things, especially when she believed someone else paid for them. What did you get me this year? She asked eagerly. I opened the box slightly, just enough for the emerald brooch to catch the light. The green stones glowed under the chandelier. Sharon gasped. Oh my. She reached for it immediately. And that's when I let it fall. The box dropped straight into the trash can. The metallic sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Sharon froze, her mouth open, her hand still extended. My hand slipped, I said calmly. Michael stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. What the hell are you doing? He whispered. I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man I once believed would protect me. You're embarrassing the family, he said. And that sentence, more than anything else that night, ended the last piece of love I had left for him. Because the word family clearly didn't include me. I straightened slightly, picked up my purse, and said the only thing that needed to be said. I built this family. Then I looked directly at Michael. And tomorrow, you're going to find out how. The room exploded into arguments as I walked toward the door. Sharon shouted after me. Don't bother coming back. Michael grabbed my arm near the exit. You're acting insane, he hissed. You're humiliating everyone. I looked down at his hand, gripping my wrist, then slowly back into his eyes. No, I said quietly. You're humiliating yourselves. Then I pulled my arm free and left. Outside the restaurant, the night air was cold, clear, almost peaceful. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. Audit complete. Evidence secured. Board meeting confirmed. I typed a short reply. Good. Then I got into my car. Because tomorrow at 2 p.m., Michael Miller would walk into a boardroom believing he was about to receive the promotion of his life. Instead, he would discover something far more interesting. That the woman he called an ATM was the person who owned the company. And tomorrow, she was going to close the account. The most dangerous battles are the ones no one sees. No shouting. No arguments. No dramatic confrontations. Just quiet preparation. Careful positioning. And the slow tightening of a trap. That's what the next 3 weeks became. A silent war. Michael never noticed it happening. Which wasn't surprising. People who believe they're winning rarely look behind them. The morning after Sharon's birthday dinner, Michael acted like nothing had happened. He came into the kitchen while I was making coffee, his tie slightly crooked, his hair still damp from the shower. For a moment, like a man rehearsing a speech in his head. About last night, he said casually, opening the refrigerator. You were out of line. I poured my coffee slowly. Steam curled upward between us. Was I? I asked. He sighed dramatically. You embarrassed my mother. Your mother embarrassed herself. Michael rolled his eyes. Evelyn, don't start. There it was again. That tone. The tone men use when they think they're being patient with someone unreasonable. I have an important board meeting today, he continued. The new owners of Apex Tech are attending. He said it with pride, like a soldier announcing a promotion. Congratulations, I replied calmly. He paused. Something in my voice confused him. You don't seem very interested, he said. I took a sip of coffee. That depends, I answered. On what? On how the meeting goes. Michael smirked. Oh, it'll go well. They're discussing a director position. His confidence was almost impressive. If arrogance were currency, Michael would have been a billionaire. You deserve it, I said. That sentence pleased him immediately. His shoulders straightened. That's what I've been saying, he replied. You know how much I've done for that company. Yes, I thought. I know exactly how much you've done. Because Sarah's audit had delivered a very detailed report. 3 weeks earlier, when I asked her to investigate Apex Tech's internal finances, she didn't hesitate. Sarah had worked with me for 6 years. She knew how my mind worked. When I asked for everything, she gave me everything. The report was 186 pages long. Every transaction, every expense, every irregularity. And Michael's name appeared far more often than he would have liked. Unauthorized reimbursements, inflated vendor invoices, consulting payments that led directly to Chloe's personal bank account. It wasn't just infidelity. It was fraud. $420,000, to be precise. Spread across 18 months. Enough to destroy his career. Enough to put him in prison if the company decided to press charges. And the most fascinating part? Michael never tried to hide it, because he believed he was untouchable. After all, the company was about to be acquired. New management, new leadership, new opportunities. He believed the chaos of transition would bury his mistakes. What he didn't know was that the new management team already knew his name, because they worked for me. The acquisition of Apex Tech had been quietly completed 2 weeks earlier through Vanguard Holdings. A routine investment, as far as the financial world was concerned. But to me, it was something else entirely. It was leverage. That morning, after Michael left for work, I sat in my office overlooking the city. Sarah entered exactly on time. She always did. Her tablet was already open. Board meeting confirmed for 2 o'clock, she said. Executive attendance mandatory. Security? Arranged. Legal? Present. Evidence? Prepared. She paused, then looked at me carefully. You're sure you want to do this publicly? I leaned back slightly. Yes. There are easier ways, she said. We could remove him quietly. I'm aware. Sarah crossed her arms. Then why the spectacle? I considered the question. Because in finance, spectacles are expensive. But sometimes, they're necessary. Because humiliation teaches better than silence, I said. Sarah nodded slowly. Understood. She tapped her tablet again. Chloe Sullivan? What about her? She's not technically responsible for the fraud. Doesn't matter. Sarah raised an eyebrow. She's part of the pattern. I stood and walked toward the window. The city stretched below us like a living circuit board. Millions of people. Millions of decisions. Millions of consequences. Michael believed he could steal from the company because he thought the company belonged to strangers, I said quietly. He forgot something important. Sarah finished the sentence for me. You're not a stranger. No. I turned back toward her. Send the final notice to the board. Sarah nodded. And the arrest authorization? Yes. During the meeting? During the meeting. She smiled slightly. That's going to be memorable. It was, but not for the reasons Michael imagined. Meanwhile, Michael's day was going exactly the way he expected. I know because later I reviewed the internal office security footage. He arrived early, confident, greeting colleagues like a man already celebrating. Big day, someone said to him. Michael grinned. Feels like it. Chloe arrived 15 minutes later. Her heels clicked across the marble floor as she walked toward his office. She closed the door behind her. Security cameras don't record sound inside offices. But body language tells stories, words don't. Chloe leaned against his desk. Michael laughed at something she said. Then he stood up, walked around the desk, and kissed her. Carelessly, as if nothing in the world could touch him. At 1:45 p.m., Michael left his office and headed toward the boardroom. Executives were already gathering. The long glass table gleamed under the lights. Directors sat reviewing documents. Michael took a seat near the center, the position usually reserved for senior leadership. Chloe sat along the wall behind the executives, watching him proudly. He checked his watch. Beer. 8:06 p.m. 2 minutes before the meeting, Michael leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident, certain. Because as far as he knew, this meeting was about his promotion. The door opened. Executives stood. Michael frowned slightly, confused. Then he turned around and saw me walking into the room. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Then the company president stepped forward. "Good afternoon, Miss Reed," he said respectfully. "Welcome." Michael blinked, slowly, like a man waking from a dream. "Evelyn," he said, "what are you doing here?" The room remained silent. And that's when the real war began. End of Chapter 5 cliffhanger. Michael still thinks this is just a coincidence. In the next 5 minutes, he's about to learn something that will destroy his entire life. That the woman he called an ATM owns the company, and the meeting he thought was a promotion is actually his termination. There are moments in life when time behaves strangely. Seconds stretch, breaths feel heavier, and the smallest movement in a room can change the direction of someone's entire future. The moment I stepped into the Apex Tech boardroom, time slowed. Executives rose from their chairs. Not dramatically, just enough to signal respect. The kind of quiet respect that exists in rooms where power is understood without needing to be explained. Michael didn't stand. Not at first. He was too confused. "Evelyn?" he said again. The name sounded foreign in his mouth. Like he had suddenly realized he didn't know who I was anymore. "What are you doing here?" No one answered him. Because no one needed to. The company president stepped forward and shook my hand. "Good afternoon, Miss Reed. Thank you for joining us." I nodded politely. "Of course." Then I walked toward the head of the table, the chair reserved for the majority shareholder. Michael finally stood. Not confidently, not proudly, but uncertainly. The way people stand when they believe something is wrong but don't yet understand how wrong it is. "What's going on?" he asked. His voice was tight, controlled. But I could see the tension forming in his jaw. He looked at the president. Then at the other directors. Finally back at me. No one rushed to explain. That was intentional. Silence is a powerful tool in rooms like this. It allows people to imagine the worst. And Michael's imagination was beginning to work overtime. "Michael," the president said calmly, "please sit." Michael didn't move. "Why is she here?" The president glanced at me briefly. Then back at him. "Because she owns the company." The words landed in the room like a dropped weight. Michael stared at him, then laughed. A short, confused laugh. "That's not funny." The president didn't smile. It wasn't meant to be. Michael's eyes flicked toward me again. "No," he said quickly. "No, that's impossible. She works in finance." "Yes," the president replied. "That's exactly why." Michael shook his head. "You're telling me Evelyn bought Apex Tech?" "Not personally," the president said. "Through Vanguard Holdings." Michael's confusion began to morph into something else. Fear. Slow. Creeping. "Why?" he asked. That question was directed at me. Finally. So I answered. "Because it was profitable." My voice was calm, steady, professional. Michael stared at me as if trying to find the wife he thought he knew inside the woman sitting across from him. He couldn't. Because she wasn't there anymore. The president cleared his throat. "Now that the ownership introduction is complete," he said, "we can begin the real purpose of this meeting." Michael sat slowly. His eyes never left my face. "What purpose?" he asked quietly. The projector screen behind me lit up. A spreadsheet appeared. Rows of numbers. Dates. Transfers. Invoices. Michael's shoulders stiffened immediately. "Over the past 18 months, the president continued, Apex Tech's internal audit department has identified a series of financial irregularities." Michael leaned forward. "This is ridiculous," he said. "No one mentioned an audit." "Correct," the president replied. It was conducted privately. Michael turned toward me again. You knew about this? Yes. And you didn't tell me? No. His voice sharpened. You let me walk into this meeting blind? Yes. The room remained perfectly silent. Executives watched the exchange with careful neutrality. Chloe stood along the wall near the back of the room. Her earlier confidence had vanished. Now she looked confused. Concerned. Michael Miller, the president continued. Our investigation shows that multiple unauthorized transactions were approved under your credentials. Michael scoffed. That's absurd. Is it? The projector changed slides. Hotel receipts appeared. Luxury stores. Private transfers. One of the directors spoke quietly. Total amount, $420,000. Michael's face turned pale. This is a mistake, he said quickly. Those expenses were business-related. Another slide appeared. Bank transfers. One name repeated again and again. Chloe Sullivan. Her breath caught audibly from the back of the room. That's my account. Every executive turned toward her. Michael stood up abruptly. Sit down, the president said calmly. Michael ignored him. This is harassment, he snapped. You can't accuse people like this without proof. I slid a thin folder across the table. It stopped directly in front of him. Open it. Michael hesitated, then flipped the cover open. Inside were printed documents, bank records, security footage stills, phone logs, every piece of evidence Sarah had collected. His hands began to tremble. That's not, he started, but he couldn't finish the sentence. Because the evidence was overwhelming. The room watched quietly as Michael realized the trap had already closed. You stole from the company, I said calmly. I didn't steal anything. You authorized payments to shell vendors. They were consulting contracts, which transferred money to your intern. Chloe shook her head frantically. I didn't know. Security stepped forward from the back of the room. Michael's voice cracked. Evelyn, please. The room froze, because this was the first time he had spoken my name like that. Not with authority, not with annoyance, with desperation. It was a mistake, he said. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're ruining my life. I leaned back slightly in my chair. No, you did that yourself. Security approached him. Michael's eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone. No one moved. No one spoke. Because in business, fraud isn't a mistake. It's a liability. And liabilities get removed. Mr. Michael Miller, the president said, your employment with Apex Tech is terminated effective immediately. One of the security officers stepped forward holding a pair of handcuffs. Michael's breathing became shallow. You can't do this, he said weakly. You can't arrest me over accounting errors. The officer spoke calmly. You're being detained pending investigation for corporate fraud. The metal cuffs closed around Michael's wrists. With a sharp click, the sound echoed through the room. Chloe burst into tears. No, 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 she said. I didn't know. Michael turned toward me one last time. His eyes filled with something I had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. Evelyn, he whispered. Please. For a brief moment, I studied his face. The man I once loved. The man who once made me laugh. The man who called me an ATM. And then, I said the only sentence that mattered. You didn't just cheat on your wife, Michael. You tried to rob your investor. Security began escorting him toward the door. He stumbled once, nearly falling. As the door opened, I added one last sentence. And bad investments. I paused. Get written off. The door closed behind him. Silence filled the boardroom again. The president exhaled slowly. Well, he said, that was efficient. Executives began gathering their documents. The meeting was already over. Because the real purpose had never been corporate governance. It had been accountability. As the room emptied, Chloe remained frozen against the wall. Tears streaked down her face. She looked at me like someone staring at a natural disaster. I didn't know, she whispered again. I stood, walked past her, and stopped briefly. You knew enough, I said quietly. Then I left the boardroom. Behind me, Michael Miller's entire life collapsed in a single afternoon. But the story wasn't finished yet. Because humiliation rarely ends in one room. Sometimes, it spreads. And Sharon Miller was about to learn that lesson next. Revenge rarely ends in a single moment. The boardroom was only the beginning. Because, when a structure collapses, it rarely collapses quietly. It spreads. Slowly. relentlessly, like cracks running through glass. And by the time those cracks become visible, it's already too late to fix them. By the time I stepped out of the Apex Tech building that afternoon, the story had already begun to travel. Corporate offices are strange places. Information moves faster than elevators. People may not know the full truth yet, but they always know something happened. Inside the building, whispers started forming before the boardroom door even closed. Employees noticed the security officers first. Then they noticed Michael being escorted down the hallway. Hands restrained, face pale, tie hanging loosely around his neck. The same man who had walked into the office that morning smiling confidently now looked like someone who had accidentally stepped into a nightmare. No one spoke directly to him, but everyone watched. Because humiliation in the workplace is contagious. Once people smell it, they gather around it like smoke. Someone whispered his name. Another person muttered the word fraud. Within 15 minutes, the entire office floor knew something serious had happened. And then Chloe walked out of the boardroom. Her confidence had disappeared. The bright smile she always wore in the office was gone. Her mascara had run slightly. Her phone buzzed constantly in her hand. Messages. Notifications. Question? She ignored them all. Because denial is often the first reaction to collapse. She walked across the office floor quickly, pretending everything was normal. But people were already staring. Not openly. Just enough. Just long enough. Someone near the printer whispered, "That's her. The intern. I heard the transfers went to her account." Chloe stopped walking. Her eyes darted around the room. "This is a misunderstanding," she said quickly. But no one answered. Because in corporate culture, silence is rarely neutral. Silence is judgment. 20 minutes later, her access card stopped working. Security escorted her out of the building. No shouting. No drama. Just a quiet walk through the lobby under the curious eyes of employees who suddenly understood exactly what had happened. And once someone is escorted out like that, they rarely come back. But the real shockwave didn't happen in the office. It happened across the city. In the house, Sharon Miller loved to show off. That afternoon, she sat comfortably in the living room, drinking tea and talking to one of her friends on the phone. "I told you my son would be promoted," she said proudly. "Director before 40. You should see the house he bought us." She laughed softly. Outside, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. Two men stepped out, both wearing dark suits, both carrying folders. The doorbell rang. Sharon frowned slightly and set down her teacup. "Hold on," she told her friend. She walked to the front door and opened it. The two men greeted her politely. "Mrs. Miller?" "Yes?" "My name is Daniel Park. I represent the Reed Family Trust." The name meant nothing to her. "What does that have to do with me?" she asked. Daniel handed her a thick envelope. "These are formal property notices." Sharon frowned. "What property?" "This residence." She laughed. A quick dismissive sound. "This house belongs to my son." Daniel remained calm. "No, ma'am. It belongs to Miss Evelyn Reed." The smile disappeared immediately. "What nonsense is this?" Daniel opened the folder and showed her the documents. The property deed. The payment records. The trust ownership papers. All mortgage payments were made by the Reed Family Trust, he explained. This property was placed in Mr. Miller's name for tax reasons. But the legal owner is Miss Reed. Sharon stared at the papers. Her expression slowly drained of color. "You're lying." "No, ma'am. You have 30 days to vacate." The teacup slipped from Sharon's hand. It shattered across the marble floor. Because in that moment, she realized something terrifying. Every luxury she had bragged about, every expensive chair, every piece of art, every vacation she had shown off to her friends, had been paid for by the woman she insulted. And that woman had just taken everything back. Meanwhile, across the city, Michael Miller sat in a small interview room at the police station. The fluorescent lights above him buzzed softly. His suit jacket had been removed. His tie hung loosely around his neck. Just hours earlier, he believed he was about to become the director of Apex Tech. Now he was answering questions from a fraud investigator. $420,000, the detective said calmly. "That's a serious number." Michael rubbed his forehead. "It's a misunderstanding." The detective slid a document across the table. "Your intern's bank account." Michael looked down at the transfer records. The same numbers that had appeared on the projector in the boardroom. The same numbers he had believed would never be noticed. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered. The detective leaned back slightly. "Your biggest problem isn't the money." Michael looked up slowly. It's the person who owns the company. Michael's voice barely worked. Evelyn. The detective nodded. You really didn't know? Michael shook his head weakly. No. The detective sighed. That might be the most expensive marriage mistake I've ever seen. 3 days later, my phone rang. I recognized the number immediately. Michael. I let it ring twice before answering. Evelyn, he said quietly. His voice sounded different. Smaller. I need to see you. No. Please. No. My mother is sick. That's unfortunate. Silence. Then he said the words desperate people always say. I made a mistake. Yes. I didn't realize what I had. I looked out across the skyline from my office window. You didn't lose everything, I said calmly. You lost the things I gave you. And then I ended the call. That same evening, Sharon sat alone in the living room surrounded by eviction papers. She read them again and again, trying to find a mistake, trying to find a loophole. But the documents were clear. Ownership. Reed, family, trust. Beneficiary, Evelyn Reed. For the first time in years, Sharon understood something she should have realized long ago. The woman she mocked was the person holding her entire lifestyle together. And now that woman was gone. Not screaming. Not fighting. Not begging. Just gone. And when the person holding everything together leaves, everything falls apart. Because the Millers believed Evelyn Reed was a cow. A quiet provider. A source of money. They never realized. They were living inside her system. And when she removed them from it, the collapse was inevitable. 3 months later, the story of Apex Tech had already faded from the headlines. Corporate scandals have short lifespans. New companies rise. New failures appear. And the world moves on. But some consequences don't disappear with the news cycle. Some consequences stay with the people who caused them. And Michael Miller was living inside those consequences. Meanwhile, life had moved forward for everyone else. On a cool autumn evening, the Grand Peninsula Ballroom hosted the Global Finance Summit. The event gathered some of the most influential investors in the country. Executives, fund managers, corporate strategists, people who controlled billions of dollars with a single decision. The ballroom glowed with soft gold light. Crystal chandeliers hung above hundreds of guests. And at the center of the stage, a large screen displayed one name. Evelyn Reed. The host stepped to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, this year's Investor of the Year award goes to someone whose strategic acquisitions have reshaped 3 major industries in the past 12 months. The audience applauded. And more importantly, he continued, someone who has proven that leadership doesn't require noise. Sometimes, it simply requires clarity. The screen behind him changed. Images appeared. Major corporate acquisitions. Market recoveries. Investment turnarounds. And at the center of every one of them, Evelyn Reed. Please welcome, Miss Evelyn Reed. The applause grew louder as I walked onto the stage. Flashes from cameras filled the room. I accepted the award calmly, because public recognition had never been the goal. Results were. The host handed me the microphone. Would you like to say a few words? I looked across the ballroom. Hundreds of faces. Investors. Executives. Reporters. People who understood power. People who respected it. For many years, I began, I believed success meant working harder than everyone else. A quiet silence filled the room. But over time, I realized something more important. Success isn't just about building the right things. It's about removing the wrong ones. Several people in the audience nodded. Because anyone who has run a business long enough understands that lesson. Sometimes the most profitable decision you can make is walking away from a bad investment. The audience applauded again. But before the sound faded, a voice shouted from the back of the room. Evelyn. The room turned. Security guards moved instantly. But I already knew who it was. Michael Miller. He looked thinner. His suit hung awkwardly on his frame. His hair was unkempt. And the confidence he once carried like armor was gone. Security approached him quickly. Sir, you need to leave. Wait! Michael shouted. Please! He pushed forward desperately. I just need 1 minute. The room buzzed with confusion. Some guests whispered. Others recognized him immediately. The man from the Apex Tech scandal. The disgraced executive. The fraud investigation. I raised my hand slightly. Security stopped. Let him speak, I said calmly. Michael walked forward slowly. Every step heavier than the last. When he reached the front of the stage, he stopped. For a moment, He simply looked at me. The woman he once believed he controlled. The woman he once called an ATM. Evelyn, he said quietly. His voice trembled. I'm sorry. The room was silent now. Hundreds of people watching. I was stupid, he continued. I thought I deserved everything you built. He swallowed hard. My mother lost the house. I lost my job. I lost everything. His voice cracked. I just need help. The same man who once told me not to make a scene was now begging in front of an entire ballroom. For several seconds, I said nothing. Not because I was thinking. Because the answer had been clear for months. Finally, I stepped closer to the edge of the stage and spoke quietly. You didn't lose everything. Michael looked up, confused, hope flickering in his eyes. You lost the things I gave you. The room remained silent. Then I added one final sentence. And those things were never yours. Security gently guided Michael toward the exit. He didn't resist. Because sometimes the moment of realization is heavier than any physical restraint. As the doors closed behind him, the host slowly returned to the microphone. Well, he said carefully, that was unexpected. Soft laughter spread across the room. I returned to the microphone briefly. Now you understand, I said calmly, why I'm so careful with my investments. The room erupted into applause. Later that night, I stood alone in my penthouse overlooking the city. The award sat on the table beside a glass of wine. For the first time in years, the silence felt peaceful. I removed my wedding ring, placed it beside the award, and looked out across the skyline. Because the truth about success is simple. It's not just about building wealth. It's about knowing when to stop financing the wrong people. And Evelyn Reed. Never invest twice in the same mistake.